Welcome back, pre-algebra students. We're in lesson 100. We're going to talk about some advanced ratio problems and how to solve them. So what we've been used to seeing is that we were told what a percentage was or ratio was, and then we were given a number that corresponded to that ratio. This is a little bit different. What we have to do is find some information through mathematics first before we can solve the problem. So here's what we're going to do for this. We're going to set up a little grid based on our word problem. And it says, the ratio of nuts to bolts was 11 to 2. If there were 260 nuts and bolts, how many were bolts? How many were nuts? So we're going to start by creating a table. So we're going to say we have the nuts here, right? And then we have bolts here. And we're going to put our ratio here for each, and then we're going to put our actual number here. So we need to have some type of proportion that we can create the two proportions, the two fractions, and do our cross multiplication with. So this is our total. So if we have nuts to bolts was 11 to 2, right? And the total number of nuts and bolts was 260. So you can see how we have two unknowns here. We can't solve a cross multiplication problem if we have two unknowns. We have to have only one unknown, only one x. So what we do is we create this third row and we add these two together to get our total. So 11 plus 2 is going to be 13. So what that tells me is that 11 out of 13 are nuts and 2 out of 13 are bolts, because that is our total involved in the ratio. So now we can solve for both of these. Let's go ahead and do bolts first. Now we know that 13 corresponds to the total, which was 260, because those are the ones across from each other. So this is our total, and these are our bolts. So our total was 260, but we don't know how many of those were bolts. Now we can cross multiply and solve that. So 2 times 260 is going to be 520, and that's going to equal 13x. And if we divide both sides by 13, let's pull up our little calculator. That's a big number to do in my head. 520 divided by 13 is equal to 40. So 40 is equal to x. Now we divided both sides by 13 to get there. Let me put that step in. I want you to see all the steps that are involved. So that would be 40 is equal to x. So 40 is how many bolts we have. So now we can either subtract 40 from 260 and find out that we have 220 nuts, or we can do the math. We can say 11 out of the 13 units was nuts, and the 13 was the total, and then we can put that over here with x for the number of nuts and 260 for the total number of items, and then we can cross multiply. All right, so we're going to do that again, and we're going to say 11 times 260, 2860. So 2860 equals 13x. And then we're going to divide that by 13 to 20. So we divide both sides by 13, and 220 is the value of x. So you see that's what we got by subtracting 40 from 260, right? So 220 plus 40 is 260. So you can see how making this little table with everything labeled will help us to create the proportion problems that we need in order to solve. Because sometimes we're not given the totals. The ratio is something we have to do some math on. We have to add the two sides together to find the total that goes on the bottom or in the denominator of our fraction. So let's do one more. Let's do 100.2. All right, so in problem 100.2, Farmer Dunkowski wanted to plant his farm with wheat and corn in the ratio of 7 acres to 9 acres. So right away in that first sentence, we can see that we're going to create our table here. And we're going to have wheat. And here's our ratio to corn. And then we need to create a total column. And then we need an actual quantity column, okay? So the ratio of wheat to corn was 7 to 9. So that's a total of 16 acres total. 7 of them wheat, 9 of them corn. So that's the way our ratio is set up. So now if you had a total of 640 acres, how many are going to be wheat and how many are going to be corn? So all we have to do is swap the numerators for wheat or corn with the x in the unknown position here and cross multiply. So let's do that. Let's do wheat first. So wheat total. So we have 7 from the wheat over the 16 total is equal to x, or actually, why don't we just use W for wheat? And then our total acres is 640. So now we can cross multiply. I'm going to use my calculator and say 7 times 640. That's 4,480 acres. And then 16 times W is 16W. So I'm going to divide both sides by 16. And then I am going to do that here, divided by 16. So 280 acres would be wheat. So that is my number here. 280 acres is wheat. So now I can do the same thing with corn, or I can simply subtract this from 640, which would probably be a little bit easier. And that would be 360, I believe. Is that right? Maybe not. Maybe I'm doing my math wrong. So let's just go ahead and do it like this. This is the way we need to know how. So corn was 9. The total was 16 for the ratio. And the actual quantity, we're going to use C this time, and 640 for the acres. So let's do our calculation of 9 times 640, because we're cross multiplying. That's 5,760. So 5,760 equals 16 times C. So we divide both sides by 16. Right, so we divide this by 16, and that tells us 360. All right, so my math wasn't that far off after all. So that would be the amount of corn. So 360. So you should be able to add these two together to get 640. So 0 and 0 is 0. 8 and 6 is 14. Carry the 1. That makes that 3, and 3 is 6. So that does add correctly. So now you know how to do these advanced ratio problems. When we're given ratios instead of percentages, with a percentage, we know that the denominator is going to be 100. But with a ratio, we don't know what that is. 7 to 9, 11 to 2. We have to combine those numbers to find out what the denominator is going to be. Unlike the percent, which we know is out of 100. Everything is out of 100, so it's given to us. Let's do one more. All right, in this third example, when the race began, the ratio of professionals to amateurs was 2 to 17. So let's start by building our table. So here we are. We have our ratio. We have our professionals, and then we have our amateurs, and then we have the total. And then we're going to use this other column for the actual number or quantity. So when the race began, the ratio of professionals to amateurs was 2 to 17. So professionals was 2, amateurs was 17. The total is 19. So we're talking about 19 units, or 19 people, and 17 of them were amateurs and 2 of them were professionals in each group. This is kind of like division in a way if you think about it. If 3,800 racers were in the race, so that's the total number, 3,800 racers, how many were amateurs and how many were professionals. So let's start with professionals this time. 2 over 19, this is the professionals, equals P, which we don't know how many P's we have, over 3,800. So we're going to multiply 2 times 3,800 is going to be 7,600. If you're wondering how I did that in my head, I just took 38 and doubled it, and that's 76, and then I just put those 2 zeros on the end. That's pretty easy if you do it that way. 19p. So now we divide both sides by 19. And let's do the math with my calculator because I can't do that part in my head. So 7,600 or 7,600 divided by 19 equals 400. So 400 equals P. That's how many professionals we had. So 400 professionals, and if we subtract 400 from 3,800, we get 3,400, right? That's what should be our answer. So let's check it and make sure. So we had 17 over 19. That was the number of amateurs, or the ratio, or the part of 19 that was the amateurs. And there was 3,800 total. So if we multiply 17 times 3,800, that's going to be 64,600. So 64,600 is equal to 19A. That's the number of amateurs. So I divide both sides by 19. And I find out that that is going to be a total of 3,400 amateurs, which is the number we came up with whenever we did the subtraction. So you see, if you can use this simple table to help you solve for the total, then you can line up everything in regards to what things you're looking for. And you could even do more than 2 rows like this, and we'll do some of those later on. But that's all we have for lesson 100. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, and have fun with those practice problems.